volume is very low. Like, can you move the speaker closer to you?
Okay, so can you hear me now? Is it better?
It's slightly
I'm
better,
not
but you're very soft spoken.
Okay, so I will use my teacher voice. How's this?
Any way to turn the volume
Is
up
there
on
any
that?
way to turn this
You
volume?
want to turn the volume up?
Yeah.
And then, maybe
This
you
way.
can turn up the computer volume.
That's the volume? Yeah, that looks like volume.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me? I'm pretending I'm teaching to a classroom full of people.
That's better.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so thank you very much. I am calling to order the Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation Governance Committee meeting. It is now 5:35 on the 11th of June. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I am not going to go through attendance. Let's try and get this done. So on the agenda, we're just going to be doing, we're going to review the comments that the board made about the bylaws, and comments that the board made about the conflict of interest code of ethics document. So I'm very happy to see Jeremy and Lauren. Thank you so much. Can we have you share your document? And thank you so much for responding to many of the comments. So let's just go item by line item, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so everybody should have, the people here should have packets, and the people online should have the email documents, okay? All right, so let's start with the bylaws. Is that okay?
We did that there, but is there the volume on the computer? Can that be?
It's gonna get a feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Lauren, is there any way you can share the bylaws? Your screen? I can't
Muted.
hear you at all. Oops, sorry. Are we muted? She's muted. Is there any way we can unmute Lauren? Lauren, can you unmute
She's
yourself
working on
or
it.
something?
Sorry, I'm not used to
You got
Teams.
it. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, I can share screens on the bylaws. Just give me a minute.
Lydia,
Yes.
so we will be able to share one document at a time. You can either share the clean bylaws, or we could share the Q&A or the questions and responses that we sent today. Do you have a preference?
Well, most of us know what the bylaws look like, so let's go with the questions and responses, and maybe we can, I don't know, side by side, talk about them. I don't know that that's possible, but yeah,
That seems like a good idea.
Yeah. So, let's do that. So we have.
And just for my benefit, so we've got governance committee members. Are there others that we haven't met yet, or in the room?
Okay, so we have, why don't I let you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Audrey Penny, non-voting member, and I happen to be a resident of Roosevelt Island, but I'm here because I work with Senator Liz Krueger.
Okay, and I'm Margie Smith, also a non-voting member, and I'm here because I was formerly chair of the governance committee when I was on the REAP board.
Wonderful.
And I'm Deputy Chief Anthony Amoroso from the Public Safety Department. I'm here today.
Okay. Nice to meet you all.
Everybody else you know, right? Hopefully?
I think so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Emil Toplin, and I'm just a member of General Public.
Okay, so we have a member of general public, his name is Emil. Okay. All right, so let me see, do we have Faye's in here, Faye's responses and,
Yep, page 3.
page 3 of the draft?
Whatever this document's called.
Oh, this one, okay, page 3.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's go through that first, instead of the code of ethics. Let's do the bylaws first and then the code of ethics, conflicts of interest afterwards, right? I think.
Okay, just to make sure I understand, just to, to start us off, the first questions or comments that we would be addressing are from one board member, and they start with, on page 1, a question about the treasurer role. Are we all in the same place?
Yep.
Yes, that's on the first page.
Page one.
I don't have it, but that's
Oh,
okay. I
on
can
that,
see
yeah,
it.
we don't have that. Okay. But isn't that the one you said we shouldn't be looking at?
I mean, that's what's under the authority work process to us, so.
Are you
Yeah, I
gonna
just
share,
wanted to be
are you
Are we
going
able
to share it
to
on the
review it
screen?
in the
I did
meeting?
review it.
No, are we able to review it in the committee?
I'm not sure, that's,
Lauren, is it
There,
okay to
I'll
share it on
confirm.
the screen? Is that okay, or no?
that's actually
Well,
kind
yeah.
of,
Were you able to,
We are
do we
both
want to just go
privileged,
through it verbally, or do we want to share screens on the comments and responses? Jeremy?
Yeah,
Jeremy?
I mean, I think everyone has a copy in front of them? I can summarize. No, okay. Yeah, I think it's fine to share screens.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Can everyone see the red font?
Yes.
Far away.
Okay, so Lauren and I will together walk you through this. I am going to assume to some degree that people read the comments, but I can summarize the topic in each case so that people know what we're talking about. So, the committee and we spent a lot of time thinking about the treasurer role. And so there are 1 or 2 comments about that. Ultimately, everyone on this committee knows, and the board knows, that we served up a draft that includes a officer position of treasurer. We made some edits to the role and responsibilities of the treasurer, and ultimately described this position as the board's primary liaison with the staff for financial matters, not a staff position itself, and not someone who would be charged with any day-to-day financial management matters, but rather a representative of the board who's, primarily focused on overseeing the financial matters for the organization. And we spent a lot of time making sure that the language in the bylaws was drafted so that no one could misinterpret it to mean that that person was effectively functioning as a member of the finance team or would be expected to have any day-to-day role akin to a staff member. And, I think not surprised to see that this question was raised. But I think we meaning us as council and the committee, thought about this very carefully and landed where we did. And, we as outside council stand by the recommendation of having this role remain in the bylaws. It's already in the bylaws. And modifying the description of the role as we did. But ultimately, you're not required by law to have a officer position called treasurer. So, as we wrote in these comments that are on the screen before you, you can either bring your practices into compliance with that section of the bylaws that describes a treasurer role. You can amend the bylaws to change the description of the treasurer role to make it work, to turn it into something that you're able to do comfortably, or you can amend the bylaws to remove the role entirely. And at the end of the day, there's a few things that in these comments that we're going to go through that are required. We have no choice because they're required by statute, and a few things where the board has discretion and the governance committee has discretion as to what it recommends. And so we've talked about this a lot, and I think everyone kind of understands the issue. It's ultimately a judgment call at the end of the day for RIA.
Okay, so, comments?
I think I would be okay removing, given the scope of what this role would require for a board member, which is a lot. It seems like this is best suited for an actual paid staff member of the Rosewood Island Operating Corporation. So I'd like to see maybe your option 2 here that you've suggested in terms of converting this what we have dubbed today as the treasurer role to something as a controller or whatever financial terminology you want to appoint to it, that would sit within the REOC Corporation staff, or alternatively, just remove it.
Yeah, before others chime in, option 2 on the screen in front of you is what we've done in the draft bylaws. The existing bylaws contemplate and call for a more robust role and responsibilities for the treasurer. So what we've done is kept the treasurer role in the bylaws, but made it, amended it, revised the language to make it clear that this is a very high level oversight role and the board's primary liaison for, for finance matters. And we think this is a compromise solution in the sense that, you have the role, but it's possible for a board member who has another job and is not compensated to fulfill that high level oversight role.
Okay, so I actually feel pretty strongly, I've been treasurer of multiple boards, and I think it's really important for a non-paid board member to actually have some kind of understanding and work directly with the CFO, to have some kind of understanding about the financials. I know that right now we have an audit committee, and that, and we also have Morris, who's from budget. So there are 2 people that are well qualified to have that kind of high level of function or without doing that much more, because Morris knows what's going on behind the scenes anyway, and whoever's in charge of audit needs to also know what's going on as well. So I don't think it's that much of a leap. I think especially since we've pared down the responsibilities.
Yeah, Lauren, can you, I'm not sorry to make you switch, but can you switch to the bylaws document and scroll to page 9, I'm sorry, page 8, section 6, which describes the treasurer role as we've revised it.
Can you see it?
No.
No?
Sorry.
No.
Others may have it in front of them in hard copy, so maybe it's fine. But I'm on page 8 of the existing draft bylaws, the draft bylaws that we've provided.
Can you see it now?
Okay.
That one
Yep.
sentence
Perfect.
at the bottom.
So
I should be able to toggle now. So.
okay. So at the bottom of page 8, you'll see the description of the treasurer role now. And, if you all are reading this sentence, the treasurer shall be a member of the board and on behalf of the board shall oversee and monitor the corporation's finances. If you read that and you think it still could possibly be misinterpreted to mean that someone has a day-to-day management role or that it's sort of unfairly burdensome for a volunteer board member who has a day job, we have no issue with adding even more language to make it even more clear that this is the person on the board who's been designated to kind of pay a little more attention to this than others on the board and report back to the board, and they're not going to be taking on additional liability. They're not going to be taking on another job, right? So I'll pause there because I want to make sure you all, who are the most important, have a chance to speak about this.
Well, I don't have the
document in front of me. However, do you have, not reading it down.
Okay.
Do you have a control listed at all? And it says, what are the, because I feel that should be there, and I'm not reading it now. And I think one should,
CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and
Yeah,
internal.
and we have a deputy comptroller as well.
so that's deputy controller.
But the function is being
That
covered, so
is
let
being
me,
listed for person.
okay, so I'm gonna defer to Drew, so you can answer the question.
In terms of the treasurer or in terms of the controller? Because if we're talking about the treasurer, the way I look at a treasurer is having financial oversight of the organization, record keeping of transaction expenses, cash management. So maybe the title shouldn't be treasurer, it should be something else, if we're paring it down. Because I don't know if it exposes any liability to the board member as well. Because, you know, the way I interpret a treasurer role is much more in-depth than what's here.
What's gonna happen in
I think a controller should do that job. And even if we don't have one, I think the controller should be listed.
But we have a deputy comptroller who handles, you know, all these transactions, you know, is in charge of the books and records, does it properly, does cash management, has oversight, works with the auditors, looks at all revenues, expenses, liabilities. So if you want a controller, I'd rather promote within. And they were actually even promoted before I started, so, or by the prior administration.
I thought he was not deputy.
He's deputy comptroller.
I think this Christian meant controller as an officer of the corporation, not as a role, not as a position, as staff member. Controller
Okay.
as an officer of the corporation.
When was the last time we had a controller that was an officer of the corporation? No, it was in the bylaws. Have we actually had one?
We
We
had,
had
like,
one, didn't we?
we had, yes, the last controller that we had was Damon DiStefano, and he was controller of the corporation, and he was performing the treasurer's duties. And
So-
all prior controllers were performing the duties of the treasurer. It was understood, and it says treasurer should exercise the control of the finances of the corporation. And at RIAC, it was controller who was performing this function. And if I may add to what Conway just said, so my personal preference that it should be a member of staff member, the way it was done in the original bylaws, because I think that staff member is best suited for this role if we have this detailed description. However, if we want a treasurer to be a board member, then we should leave only general oversight of finances. So two options, and again, it's for the board to decide. If it's just detailed and specific description of treasurer functions as it exists in our current, still current bylaws, and it existed since the creation of corporation, it was a member of staff who was treasurer, and it was a controller. Or at least it should be controller or CFO. Alternatively, the new suggestions are from our outside counsel to have a board member who would be a treasurer exercising overall oversight of the finances of the corporation. So that's the second option. If it's a board member, it should be generic oversight overall without these details. If it's a staff member, we can keep the details, and it should be either CFO or controller. But again, I'm sorry, I don't have any, like, we still have this dilemma.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of wording, and
Can I-
it's clear in the wording. The question is, what is it we're going to do?
What is preference?
Are we
Yes.
going to have,
Can I ask
you know, if the inspector general come down and says, I want to talk to your treasurer, who shows up?
Okay, so
Will
Matt,
we actually have a person that's going to be the treasurer? Because I think we're fine right now, if you said with the two board members, the one from the Office of the Budget and the audit, chair of the audit committee, and then we have Drew as the CFO and her whole organization. I'm not sure what we need another person for.
I agree. Megan, you were saying?
I had a question about the historical position. The staff person that was hired at RIAC as a controller, that was their title in the corporation, right? Were they the treasurer to the board? Is that as part of their duties? Is that what you're saying, Lava?
I think that's what was understood, because we were discussing before with previous general counsels and presidents, it was understood that treasurer, there was no official designation, there's no resolution stating that treasurer is a controller.
But their,
But it was
their job as controller or at REAC in their position
Yes.
was just considered to be treasurer for the board. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Megan, 1 second, just.
Hold on, you got it? Got it.
Finally, sorry.
Please silence all.
Okay.
I got no blood in the finger or something.
Can you repeat? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Happens. Go ahead. Repeat what you just said for the benefit of everybody, please.
No, so I was just trying to like, just delineate like that. The person was like their official staff position was controller, but they act unofficially as the treasurer. They're
That's
not
correct.
appointed by the board.
They were not appointed by the board. Yes,
Okay.
there was no resolution. They were not officer, but like it was kind of common practice, it's understanding and practice that if you need treasurer signature on any documents, it will be a controller who will be signing in lieu of treasurer.
Okay.
But there was no official designation, for example, like we have for CFO or general counsel, there was no resolution of the board.
Was that at the chair's discretion as to who served in that position?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
But there was no resolution. Again, controller was never officer for the meaning of the bylaws.
Sure.
She was not officer, or she was not officer of the corporation.
Kind of like a committee member?
Yes. So whenever we net on the documents and there says treasurer, that controller's signature will be there.
So,
Okay, so sorry, Jeremy, can I ask my question, please?
please,
The question I had was, when was the last time we had a controller?
2 years ago?
2 years ago,
Yeah,
before I
when
was
the-
seated.
Yes.
Before.
When Diamond left, yes, and we have Marcus, who is deputy controller. Yes, he's performing this controller's role,
Okay.
deputy controller.
So prior to our seating,
Mhm.
the
There was a controller.
There was
all
controller.
these years, for at least since 2008 when I started, we always had a controller.
Yeah.
okay.
He left because of all the things that's going on.
Mm.
Okay. All right, so we haven't been in compliance, and this is true of most of the bylaws. We haven't been in compliance with the bylaws for the last 2 years because of that controller. And so what we're trying to do with the new bylaws is make sure we can set something in place that we can be in compliance with.
I wouldn't say we're not in compliance. We have a person who was performing these duties, like if necessary,
Yeah.
Marcus would perform these duties as a treasurer to the board. Maybe.
Okay,
Exactly.
so,
And I don't.
I wouldn't say we were not.
so the
Yeah.
function has been done.
Yes,
But the actual
The word treasurer was.
treasurer appointment, because it actually says that the
Yes,
treasurer
this
will
is-
be appointed.
yes.
And the
So it should
treasurer
be
has
something
not been
official.
appointed.
Mhm. This
Right.
official component is missing.
Yeah, so that's where we're out of compliance with. The actual appointment has not occurred, right? Correct?
There was no resolution.
There is
Yeah.
no resolution, there has been no at all appointment, neither with, Megan didn't do it, Diana didn't do it, nobody since I've been
Maybe there
here.
were appointments for the treasurer in the past. I can only testify what happened
No,
after
but
2008.
since.
Yeah, but
Since. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have something in the bylaws in place that we can be in compliance with. And that's important, okay? All right, so,
And I can't also justify hiring an additional person under my team and paying $170,000 when they, yeah, and then plus benefits, and there's not enough work for them to do. I can't justify that. I'd rather use those monies towards public service or other critical projects.
But 2 years ago, we did have CFO and controller and deputy controller, so we have
I think
all of this.
I think that's overstaffing.
We had actually, we had.
I'm being honest, that's over, I mean,
Sounds so
would I love to have another person? Yes, but I can't justify that.
The controller should be somewhat independent from CFO, but if it's just totally reporting to you. so
No,
we're-
but.
Who did Maneshwar report to when?
Muneshwar would report to Steve Charonis, and Muneshwar had Nancy Lee, who was assistant CFO and controller, an assistant controller. So we had 3 people at that time.
So what Drew is saying is that from her perspective as managing the entire finance aspect of the corporation, she doesn't see the necessity to have an extra body.
But controlling is
But I think-
CPA also, there should be some requirements to hold this position.
Yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the whole point of a controller is that they're not managed by the CFO.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
But why do we have an deputy
Yes.
controller?
So the question I have still,
Wait, but are they not part of the finance team? I don't understand, aren't,
No, they're also part of the finance team, but
but,
they can do something that's not necessarily.
yeah,
some
of course, they can
fall
do
under-
independent work for me, that's
Right, so
fine,
like-
yeah, but
Overseeing leases, all these payments,
Yeah.
and that's what controller was doing, not as much as
we
CFO.
outsource that too?
is it
No,
being,
no,
we
we
never
need-
have. A lot of the legal work. Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we need someone that is
Mhm.
not, selective.
and so that's why I think it's important for a board member to be treasurer
I think that's the
and
best.
have no and to have oversight, as opposed to you having oversight over the controller.
Can I?
We do not have, the board member will not have to sign.
How do you know, babe?
Well, do you have time to be,
I do not.
Okay, so
here that is.
I may have the time.
Yeah, well, you can't,
Howard
they
might
can't
have
leave
the
it.
time.
So,
Howard
yeah,
might-
I think that's, Faye's right, like, this is, from
And
what
I
I,
don't think it should have been written out of the entire, bylaws. It should be there, even if we don't have one. Why isn't it there?
Did the outside counsel offer, advice on
Can-
That was suggestion by outside counsel, to have treasurer as a member of the board.
As best practices, this is what outside counsel recommends as best practices.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
council recommends what we tell them.
I'm sorry.
No, the council recommends.
No, they
best
will fix
Tell
here,
them
we
we
would,
would like, if we were.
Say, if you're chair of the governance committee, then you can tell outside counsel what you want. You are not the chair of the
No,
governance
I'm not the
committee.
chair, but you
I
want to later,
want,
you won't get
I-
it back.
excuse me,
If I were you, I'd try to
Excuse
send
me.
it now.
excuse me.
You're excused.
Thank you very much. As I was
Okay.
saying before, go ahead, Jeremy.
So I was, it was a little bit hard to hear toward the end there, but I think there's a couple of important points here. One is that in the parallel context of the entire nonprofit sector, there are hundreds of thousands of New York nonprofits who have board officers, and the most common ones are a chair, a treasurer, and a secretary. And it's very well understood in those roles that you take on this, you get elected as officer or appointed. You don't have to be an expert in finance, but, and if you're the secretary, you don't have to be an expert in taking minutes and sending out notice, but you serve in that role while you're elected to that role. You do your best. But it is very much a board role, and it doesn't change your fiduciary obligations or liability. Everyone is obligated on the board to act with reasonable care and diligence. And, that means different things depending on what skills you bring to the job, as long as you kind of do your best and pay attention and don't ignore red flags. And one of the reasons why this is a common setup to have a non-staff member as treasurer is the idea of checks and balances. Having someone on the board who is not in finance management, taking a look at things and asking questions from sort of an outsider standpoint to make sure things make sense is generally a best practice and recommended by auditors, accountants, lawyers as an extra layer of checks and balances. Now, we are all very well aware that REAC is not a nonprofit corporation. It's a public authority and slightly different requirements. And you may have other checks and balances in place that make you feel that this is not necessary. I haven't really heard those yet, but it could be, oh, well, we have to have a ICO and we have, 4 different layers of auditing. And, those are the types of reasons that I think you might, convince me that this isn't a necessary check and balance. But I haven't really heard those yet. And so I'll say that. And then the other point I want to make is that we really don't recommend having something in your bylaws that you don't feel really confident you can always do. And so a lot of times in drafting bylaws, we include provisions earlier in the bylaws in the officers section saying that the board can elect and appoint other officers by whatever titles it wants from time to time by passing a resolution. And you can always hire staff people. So right now, it may not make sense to have 2 full-time employees, one as a controller position because there's not enough work for them. But 5 years from now, who knows? Situation may have changed. And if the board wants to get together and create a new officer role, they can do that and adopt a resolution. So we always kind of place a premium on making sure your bylaws are flexible to accommodate what you may need in the future, and also not being so specific where we're writing something in that you don't feel confident that you'll be able to comply with. I mean, right now, this treasurer position is in your bylaws, and it's been, let's say, vacant for a while. So I'll pause there. Is that responsive to some of the questions at the end there?
I think so. Just want to add that for Battery Park City Authority bylaws, in their bylaws, the treasurer is CFO and controller. So that function is performed by staff member in Battery Park City.
Yeah. Well, to me, I think we should be choosing between
Two people actually. They have Section 9 treasurer, chief of financial officer, and controller.
Right.
So they have both chief financial officer, that fiscal officer of the authority, and in charge of the books and accounts of the authority, and have supervision of the accounting procedures. And they have a controller under the direction of the treasurer/chief financial officer. So perform all duties incident to his position and office. But they don't have separate position for CFO. That's why they have treasurer. And we do have separate position. They combine CFO and treasurer.
Right.
In our bylaws, we have separate for CFO and separate for treasurer. That's your suggestion to be for the board member. Battery Park City has this position combined, treasurer/CFO.
Suppose we did that.
Yeah.
That's an option.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I think my advice is that you choose between option 2 and 3 on the screen here. Option 2 is what the draft bylaws that we provided you said. It keeps the role of treasurer, but makes it something that you can actually comply with, as opposed to the existing bylaws. Number 3, I mean, I think we should probably take a moment to talk about that. Let's say you just get rid of this role in the bylaws. You can always create it later under the earlier section of the bylaws under officers that says that the officers of the corporation shall be the following, and it names certain officers, and that the board may establish or select other officers with such other titles and responsibilities from time to time as it deems appropriate. So as kind of a thought exercise here, let's say we got rid of this position entirely, the treasurer position. That doesn't change the staff, and it doesn't contradict your current practices because you don't have this. So does anyone have any concerns or thoughts about what it would be like if you just didn't have this position specifically established in the bylaws? You could create it later if you wanted, but you take it out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you're essentially describing the status quo today, I think.
Right.
We don't have that. One of the things that you said resonated with me was that we want to make sure we put in the bylaws what we can actually do. And so if we're saying, even as you proposed that the treasurer shall be a member of the board, and on behalf of the board will oversee and monitor the corporation's finances, and if we delegate that to say Morris, and just say like this, and that shall be the division of budget will always carry this role. I'd want to check with Morris first to make sure that he can actually
I was gonna
do
say,
that.
we can't be, and also the same goes for Howard as chair of the audit committee. I mean, we can't just be appointing people without asking them first. And I think,
Right.
Agreement, yeah, they need to agree.
and I think that
That's exactly what Howard's comment about treasurer.
Yeah, I'm not, in other words, I'm not against it. Yeah, I'm not against it in principle. I just want to make sure it works practically.
I think the board members that are, I wouldn't say against, but are not in favor of this section, take issue with the language that says shall be a board member. I don't think any of them argue that there should be a treasurer. I think it's how it's demanding it be a board member who, this is in addition to committee position, this is in addition to regular board work. And I think oversee is also a word that they're taking issue with. If you just do monitor, maybe they would be more amenable to that and take out shall be a board member, and maybe just put may as an option to be a board member, or it could be a staff person appointed to treasurer, but at least there's still a treasurer, and the ability to choose who that person is flexible.
So I'll say, I think if it's a staff member, I worry that we're just adding another role when you don't need a role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we have CFO role already
Right.
outlined.
We don't need 2 CFOs yet.
And we don't need to pay 2 CFOs.
Kind of top heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
And even if you were to say the CFO shall ex officio serve as the treasurer, right? It's kind of like what we do, I think, with the general counsel. We say, like, unless the board determines otherwise, the general counsel shall fill the role of secretary ex officio. And we did that because you kind of said that's what's happening in practice. We preserved the flexibility that the board could have 2 separate individuals doing that in the future. But, so let's say we said that the CFO, similarly here in section 7, shall ex officio serve as the treasurer. We could do that, but why? Why have this other title of treasurer? We're amending your bylaws. This is your opportunity. If you've decided that this role is useless and not happening, I don't mean to be flip, but if you decide that this role hasn't been filled forever and is not really necessary, this treasurer role, then now's the time to amend the bylaws to take it out or change it.
I actually think that it's a good idea to have another set of eyes to identify red flags, especially on the board. I know we have people who don't agree with me, but I think it's a great idea.
I mean, we could change it to say whatever, you could say the treasurer shall be a member of the board and shall, on behalf of the board, make reasonable efforts, do their best to be able to report back to the board on finances. You can come up with maybe a little better language than that, but I think you get the point, right?
Because there have been a lot of financial snafus that have been going on in the past, and it would be nice to have somebody who's not being paid to have eyes on it to see if there are identifiable red flags and say something.
The recent investigation.
Yeah, especially the recent investigation, specifically the recent investigation. So, I mean, we already know that we have issues. We have corporate issues, recently historical issues that we need to make sure that we protect against. And the bylaws are a good way to do that.
Correct. Over time, we've had more than one issue like that come up.
So I think that it's important that we have a second set of eyes, or even a third set of eyes. Maybe multiple, co-treasurers, I don't know. If one person can't do it, maybe we can share the burden, whatever. But it's something, it was something that we could have, them talk to the CFO and see if the CFO has any concerns, or talk to whoever and see if it requires a good relationship with staff.
Lydia,
Yeah.
the audit committee right now has only like quarterly oversight. There is an audit committee that seems to meet once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Well, a little less than once a
It's
month.
less than that, yeah.
Yeah, less than once a month.
Yeah, and to your point, which I think is a good point, I'm just thinking through, who would best capture, say, a rogue spending allocation it wouldn't be a board that only meets quarterly. It would be somebody who's actually in the organization on the staff that can see what's going on a day-to-day. That's who's gonna catch it. It's not gonna be us who meet once every 3 months.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing is, I mean, we have somebody on staff, and it wasn't caught, right? We had,
No, it was caught, actually. That's exactly the cause of this investigation.
no, it wasn't caught by staff.
No, it was caught by staff.
Who,
I cannot.
okay.
We can't,
so
we
what
can't,
happened-
we can't disclose that, but.
What happened?
Yeah.
I'll just say it was caught.
Right, don't want to.
Okay,
Yeah, we
so-
shouldn't be getting into
but it
this,
wasn't-
like,
Yeah, what if we were
Okay,
to,
it's not.
on section 6, I mean, what if we make it permissive? You know, what if we said the board may appoint a treasurer who shall be a member of the board and on behalf of the board shall oversee and monitor the corporation's finances? You know, this gives the board the option to do this, but doesn't make it a mandatory position.
I think May is the best.
Keeps us compliant, that's for sure.
Yes.
Right, and then, so,
No rogue spending.
Okay.
Lauren,
We're
if
talking
I may,
hypothetically.
We also know historically there have been.
Lauren,
rogue
can you turn
spending.
on track changes so that they can see what you're changing? And so this would affect 2 places. One is the language that Lauren is adding right now. I don't know if you can all see that.
Yes.
Treasurer, you know, maybe put a comma after treasurer, Lauren. And then the other place this would result in a change is if you scroll up to section 1 of that article. You know, here we list that, we say that the officers shall be the following, right? And instead we could, you know, at that next sentence, Lauren, where your cursor is, leave it as is. The board may appoint a treasurer. Sorry. Yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. Comma, and may establish, appoint, or elect such other officers, right? You know, this gives the board the ability to do this, or, you know, to consider the kind of facts and circumstances as they exist at the time. If you have a board member who's willing, and doesn't set this up so that if you don't have one, you're out of compliance with your bylaws or that's vacant. And back to that other section, you could say, board may appoint a treasurer, and, you know, and maybe put a comma at the end there, you know, and say, and, you know, perform whatever other duties and responsibilities, you know, as the board may determine from time to time, and something like that to leave that specific duties open. I don't feel strongly about that new language I just added, but what do people think about that change from making it sort of a mandatory officer position to making it a permissive position in the discretion of the board?
I think that's fine.
And actually, Lauren, I think we already say at the beginning of the officers that each officer, yeah, in section 1, we say each officer shall have the powers and duties assigned to them in these bylaws or by the board from time to time, subject always to the control of the board. So you can take out that phrase that I dictated a moment ago, and I think it's already covered.
Whoops, deleted all of them.
Okay. So Megan, I'm gonna ask you, are you okay with that? Megan?
I am fine with the may appoint a treasurer part. I still think other board members are not gonna like that it has to be a member of the board.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's exactly what the comment from Mr. Polly, that.
But even like Dr.
It's
Malamed raised
okay.
issue with that. Other people have raised issue with the board member being a treasurer, and I think that's going to be a hard one for them to agree to validate these.
So let's say we
Uh,
appoint the CFO. Let's say let's say we make this more flexible, as Megan has suggested, and saying that who, who may but need not be a member of the board. Lauren, why don't you put that in so we can all see it as we think about it? Right. So now let's think about who this person would actually be. It would most likely be someone on staff who's part of the finance department, right?
Mhm.
And then what role do they play by virtue of also having this treasurer title? Is there an expectation that they will report to the board, or present to the board? And this, Megan, this may be, I might want to stick with you on the thread here because I understand why you're suggesting this, but I want to just kind of play it through.
Can I bring something up? Many years ago, there was a CEO that did something that was investigated, and he was found guilty and was able to get away with that kind of financial malfeasance because, in my opinion, I don't know for sure, the CFO didn't have the CFO reported to him. So I want there to be an independence because right now, the CFO still reports to the CEO if it's the CEO that's creating the malfeasance situation. Where's the oversight that will catch the malfeasance if the ex officio, CFO, treasurer is reporting to CEO? And that has happened in the last couple of decades. So there is a concern.
So let's stick with that. So what about the internal controls officer? What is that person's function? Would they be a logical person to catch something like that?
I don't think so.
Well, Mary
The
thinks internal controls.
internal controls is risks and
Yeah,
it's not
it's
only.
a whole different thing.
Yeah,
What do they do?
Maybe it's
Yeah.
not possible, but also the CFO should be reporting if they have a concern related to the CEO doing something improper. They should report that to the board. It shouldn't have to be a treasurer to do that. Like that's,
Okay.
Right.
Well,
like there is a gap there. Like there's a fail-safe there, and that they should come to the board, and that has happened. People have come to the board with concerns.
Sure, and you probably have a
so that's
whistleblower
work-
policy
that is
that
working.
says that explicitly,
We do.
right? And then you have auditors. You have external auditors, right, who serve as a
Right.
check and balance on the
Correct.
finance
On the
team.
financials.
And the auditors report to the board.
so, but then, were the current, treasurer role or whatever that was already in place, I don't know, was it still, I don't know, because the last time this was updated was 2010. So that's 15 years ago, and this is the last couple of decades, so I don't know exactly what the timing was.
10 years ago.
That, what's his name? Was it, I don't even remember which guy.
The treasurer?
Is this already public?
Yeah,
Okay,
it should be public, yeah, it should absolutely be public, because it's in, the IG report came out, and it was, I forget his name. The
What are we
guy-
talking about?
Anyway, what is the example?
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to
Whatever.
name names. Like, it doesn't matter. What's the example you're trying to avoid?
Guy Smiley.
Guy Smiley,
Cook-
whatever.
cook some-
We want to make sure that that's explicit,
Mhm.
and that a whistleblower, if it's the CFO, is not subject, if they're whistleblowing against the CEO, not subject to getting fired.
But there are whistleblower protections. That's a separate thing than the being a treasurer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Right.
but the thing is,
you're
I'm
making this
just
very
concerned-
specific to the treasurer role being an investigator of something, and I think your concern about highlighting fraud or reporting somebody that's doing something inappropriate, like, I think there are other avenues that could be used to highlight those issues, whether it is going to the inspector general directly, coming to the board. There are other ways, internal control officer. There are things in place to prevent that. Talking specifically about a treasurer, like, this is different. Like,
No, I'm
Well-
just saying, I think extra set of eyes is good.
But
That's my
also,
point.
I think we need to start with the definition of treasurer and officer with the help of some
Well,
The CFO, we need to distinguish, the CFO provides the overall financial leadership and strategic vision for the corporation, and the treasurer is responsible for day-to-day oversight and execution of this vision. So it's treasurer, it's not overview as we try to put it here. This
Right.
actually is the opposite, it's
Yeah.
day-to-day operations, that's why. it's-
No, but we're
this is
defining
how
it
the board has
differently.
But that's the definition
Where are
of
you pulling that
treasurer,
from?
and this thing like.
Oh, just general-
Yeah, but Lada, I'm saying that the bylaws define treasurer differently.
But the role of treasurer is practical execution of
We
financial
have the
strategy.
treasurer definition as we're drafting it up here. Can you see
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes, exactly. But we just, because we removed all this detailed, but overall treasurer is daily operations. That's why in Better Park City, the CFO.
Not here.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it's
Not-
probably helpful to think historically. The bylaws that are currently in place were adopted in 2010, right? When I look at the existing bylaws, they describe a role that is so hands-on that it had to have been a staff member. They say, for example, act as controller of the corporation and be in charge of books and accounts, right? So that may have made sense for the organization in 2010, but I think Drew was saying we just don't need that second full-time staff person in the finance department, or that third or additional person. So it just, what you have in the existing bylaws for this treasurer role does not make sense for this organization right now. So you don't want to leave that language in your bylaws. You want to change it. And to us, where we've landed on the screen here seems completely fine and a nice compromise between those options 2 and 3 that we were talking about. This basically gives the board the option to do this in the future if it would like. And we've even said they may but need not be a member. So the board can weigh the pros and cons of having a non-staff treasurer versus having a staff treasurer versus not having one at all. We don't just create positions for no reason to comply with bylaws that are out of date, right? So I would either do this or just take it out.
So should we take it out, or should we do
I
that?
think putting
What?
may in gives you both options. I think like he was just saying, if you just make it, if you say may, if you decide later on, oh, maybe we shouldn't have taken it out, you're stuck then with your bylaws. You have to revise them again. If you just say may, it can just lay there and never get filled. If you want to fill it, it's already in there to get filled.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. And this is really more like making this even more explicit, because we already say in section 1 of this section that the board may establish, appoint, or elect such other officers with such other titles as it deems it wants to from time to time. So we've left this here in section 6 and made it explicit, but even if we didn't say that, the board in a year from now, 5 years from now, could get together, adopt a resolution, say we're creating the position of treasurer, the officer position of treasurer. But maybe you think it's important enough to make it explicit here, since we've spent, a lot of time deliberating over it, and putting it in there by name would symbolize that it's something that is, that the organization and the governance committee thought a lot about and wants the board to consider, and that the board also agrees it's worth having flagged in the bylaws as something, a specific position to consider.
Any thoughts?
I think, so, yeah, I like the may gives us optionality here. Howard has a good suggestion that goes to your point, actually, that says, with regard to audit committee functions, I was just flipping to see how we're defining their responsibilities right now, because it may go to your concern about being able to, if we give the audit committee more specific, expand their remit to specifically look to make sure that the finances are being handled properly, and, you know, to go into your concerns, like looking for, you know, whatever we can imagine may be happening, that may be the answer to the concern that you raised earlier.
Okay.
Specifically, I'm thinking about like them being able to do an independent audit of the finances.
Well, I mean, they can. I mean, that's
Or
already.
hire an external auditor to come in and do an.
Yeah, but that's already within the purview of the audit committee.
So, yeah. So there may not need to be a change of language, actually. But that was just something that Howard had raised in his comment.
Yeah, the treasurer has been defined as external to the daily operations, blah, 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 but this seems contrary to whatever.
The section
No,
that says we
because
don't get
the
paid.
person unpaid, it's
Yeah.
is a lot of time and effort.
Right.
And maybe we don't really need this. Yes, originally we thought option number 3 is not good, but now after this discussion, I think maybe that's an option. We have CFO and we will have audit committee who will be overseeing. So why additional oversight by treasurer when we have audit committee who can hire that, maybe this position is not even necessary. I mean, but it, again, not.
Yeah, you could meet more often, or you can ask for information, I mean, you know, more frequently.
Okay. Yeah, so it may do so through the audit committee, but explicit expansion of that committee's ambit. Jeremy, what do you think?
What do I think about making a little more explicit the audit committee will serve as this check and balance that we were kind of after with the treasurer role? Is that kind of the theme here?
Yeah.
I think that's okay, and I think the audit committee already has that in its jurisdiction, you know, or at least that's kind of understood, and the statute calls for what the audit committee will do, and you have a charter, or you're going to have one. I can't remember. So, yeah, I think that idea is fine. Do we think a change is needed for that?
Maybe something with a little more teeth. The current language that says the committee shall recommend to the board the hiring of a certified independent accounting firm for the corporation. Maybe something more like shall do this like twice a year or quarterly, or something that gives more direction for the audit committee.
Maybe we should ask Howard.
Well, and we have it says at the end, the board shall adopt a charter for the audit committee, which shall comply with the public authorities law, reflect applicable ABO guidance. Remind me, I think we have some board resolutions maybe that set out what the audit committee does.
Okay.
It already says this, yes.
So that might be a good
yeah,
place for you to add more robust, you know, or more frequent meetings, or things like that, rather than in the bylaws.
Yeah, it doesn't need to live in the bylaws necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a conversation with the audit committee itself should be had before kind of messing with their charter, and leave that as an option for them to discuss.
What do you think? Keep it as may or eliminate it?
I think if it's me, then we can keep it then.
Gives us the option.
Yeah,
Gives us the option.
option.
What do you
Because I
think?
think you feel strongly about it, and I think leaving the May in gives you the option to come back later on and do it.
So let's recommend the May? We're okay with that? Megan, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and if this is sort of the last, you know, sticking point when you go back to the board, we're always happy to prepare 2 versions for their consideration, one with this and one without it, you know, if that's helpful. But also just mindful of we have a 7 p.m. Stop, so I'm glad we talked.
Oh, I love you.
Our treasurer, okay, we have to move this along. Okay, all right, so we're going with the May, and let's, next, all right, so,
I think we can go to number 2 on the
Yeah.
council responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, why don't you take us through that, please?
Sure. So, independent member is a defined term in the Public Authorities Law. And the first time we use the term independent member in this draft of the bylaws, we do say as such term is defined in 2825 of the Public Authorities Law. We did not include the definition in the bylaws because it's long. But we can add it if the board would like.
As long as we incorporate it by reference, I think it's fine.
Sure, because if they change it, then we have to change the bylaws. It's
Right.
wrong.
yeah, just refer
Right.
As
to
long
it
as it
this way.
refers to that.
Okay. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, where does that, I'm sorry, what section does that appear in the bylaws? Just gonna make sure I can put some eyes on it. What we need to-
Let's see, the first time we use independent member. I believe is in the governance
Committees.
committee.
Committees?
Yep.
Section
Governance
4.
Committee on page 11.
Okay, yeah, as such term is defined in section 2825, yeah, so it's incorporated by reference, I think we're fine.
Okay.
I'm okay as well with that. You guys are agree?
Yeah. Okay, next. Go forward.
Okay, so the next is about the language that's in the, we added language to the bylaws that does track Public Authorities Law sections for the Audit Committee and the Governance Committee. We can remove the language and incorporate by reference like we did for independent member. But regardless, whether the language is specifically in the bylaws or just by reference, REAC is subject to the law.
Yeah, I mean, this just tracks the language of the statute. This is the right of REAC and the board in terms of these committees. So I think, I completely understand where the comment is coming from. But this is one where we're just stuck with what the law says. So we can't change that right by taking it out of the bylaws and we can't say that you can't do it. So.
And this additional information, I believe it's from ABO guidance.
Yeah, there's the FAQs from the ABO. It is permissible to appoint a private citizen, non-board member to one of these committees to meet the minimum requirements, provided that these non-board members are independent and don't constitute a majority of the committee. So this is like a combination of both explicit statement in the statute of that right and then some FAQs from the ABO that respond to a question about that.
What's the takeaway from the FAQs?
Sorry, Conway?
What was the takeaway from the FAQs on the ABO guidance? Yeah.
Yeah, so Lauren, where are we in the bylaws first, just to ground? Okay, so language we're talking about, in addition, the board may appoint non-board members, including private citizens, to the governance committee to meet the minimum requirements in this section 4, provided these non-board members are independent and don't constitute a majority. So, and the minimum requirements in this section 4, Lauren, are that you have 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not less than 3 independent members, meaning board members. And I think what they're saying is that if you can't get 3 board members, you can appoint a private citizen as long as they also meet the definition of independent, because the legislature has decided that 3 is an important number and it's better than 2. And if you can't get 3 board members, then next best thing is to get 3 people, even if 1 isn't a board member, as long as they're independent. So this FAQ, now to answer Conway's question, is the question in this FAQ from the ABO is, how should a public authority constitute its audit and governance committee? And it says, in accordance with the statute, and it cites different sections of the Public Authorities Law, the audit and governance committees are to be comprised of no less than 3 board members who meet the independence requirement. In the event that a board has less than 3 independent members, the board can appoint non-independent members to the committees, but the independent members must constitute the majority of the committee. It is permissible to appoint a private citizen, i.e. a non-board member, to one of these committees to meet the minimum requirements, provided that these non-board members are independent and do not constitute the majority of the committee.
Got it.
So our committee membership on every committee is 4, so their minimum requirement is 3, actually. So once we already have the board members, the committee comprising of board members, then we cannot get new non-board members because we already satisfy the minimum requirements by the board members themselves. So only in case we lack this
Minimum
person.
requirement is a minimum requirement.
Yes, the minimum requirement is
That's
3,
what
and it's 4 is what we have on our resolution. So our
Yep.
committee is comprised of 4 members, because 5, it will be the board meeting quorum.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lada.
All right. Anything else?
I'm not sure I got that. I think, Lada, I thought the point you were making is,
Yeah,
we've already got the minimum requirements, and the only time you can appoint non-board members is when you don't meet the minimum requirements.
right, we don't, we
So-
have only 2 people, for example, when we need someone else, there's
Right.
no board members, we can invite
So
someone.
I'm just thinking about right now, you guys already have 3,
Mhm.
so that says you can't appoint
But you
Audrey and I
guys,
to be
you
here.
guys aren't members, you guys are advisors,
Oh, okay.
all right? Yeah, you aren't,
Whatever.
yeah, you're advisors.
Just want to make sure we weren't breaking the new
Yeah.
bylaws.
No, we're not creating,
Okay.
yeah, you guys are advisors.
Got it.
And thank you very much.
There's a separate section for advisors
For
in the
advi-
bylaw.
Okay, okay, I didn't see that.
Okay.
All right, so let's keep
Yeah,
rolling.
committee advisors, there you go.
Okay,
All right.
so the next comment is about this section of the bylaws, which we drafted to say the bylaws may be amended, the bylaws may be altered, amended, or repealed by 5 more board members at any meeting of the board. So the threshold there is 5. The current bylaws, the existing bylaws say that the bylaws can be amended by a majority of the board then in office. So that would be a lower threshold than just a flat number of 5. Mr. Polibi had made a comment here that this seemed contrary to the Act citation, and we may want to revise it. And so that's correct, that the existing bylaws match the Act, and generally bylaws can be more restrictive than the law, and raising the minimum threshold required for amending bylaws is not in violation of the law. We discussed raising this minimum threshold, and since amending the bylaws is such a significant act, the thought was that it would be appropriate to use a higher threshold, but ultimately the choice to keep the threshold as is or to increase it is at the discretion of the board.
Yeah, and let me do do a mathematical example here, right? So how many board members do you have right now?
9, well, 8.
Okay.
9 seats, 1
Yeah, it's
empty.
supposed to be 9.
Yeah,
Supposed to be
1 empty.
Right, exactly. So what we're talking about here is the denominator of the fraction. Right? If we say a majority then in office, and you were down at 6 at some point, a majority is 4. Or if you're at 7 at some point, a majority is 4. Right now you're at 8, a majority is 5. Even if you were at full capacity at 9, a majority would still be 5. But I think in the conversations with the governance committee, given this amending the bylaws is a very weighty, significant act, we were planning for a situation where there could be as few as 6 or 5, right? And no one really liked the idea that 3 out of 5 members could amend the bylaws, or, 4 out of 6. And so people seem to agree that, given the significance of the act, it made sense to make sure that the bylaws would never be amended by fewer than 5 people. Right? If you're at full capacity or where you're at now, 5 is the same as a majority then in office. So this is as Lauren said, this is a judgment call for you and the board. I think it's a good decision to set the minimum at 5. But thoughts?
Agreed.
Yeah, we've gotten very low on board members in past years. Remember?
Once we had
I mean,
five,
yes.
five, which
We
means
had
3.
4 once, actually. So, yeah, I think 5 is a good number for a
Well,
decision like this.
And I guess another thought is, let's say you reach the point where you only had 4 board members. Let's
Yeah,
hope that
we
never
have.
happened. But,
It has.
then I guess you could see, it could be better to have a majority then in office, because if you only have 4, you can't amend the bylaws until the governor appoints some more board members. So these are kind of the pros and cons of this sort of thing as we think through hypothetical outcomes.
Okay, do we need to weigh in on yes or no on any of these? Would we keep it at 5? Is that the consensus here?
I would like
That's
to
our-
see the definitions in the law that the majority director is not in office, but I see it makes sense if it's 9 or 8 board members, it doesn't matter. It only matters if we have less than 8, right? It's not even the quorum, but the definitive number. I would agree with Mr. Paul on that, but it's up to the board.
I mean, we could spell it out in even more detail and say that, 5 board members at any meeting, provided if there are less than 5 board members at any time, it's by the majority then in office. You know what I mean? We can draft for any scenario.
Okay, that wouldn't be a bad idea. What do you think, Carmen?
But majority then in office will cover everything. If it's 9 or 8 or 7 or 6, why then we need to say 5 members? If the majority of directors done in office would work for every scenario.
Does us having less board, so our, by statute, it says we have 9 board members, whether or not we physically have 8 people, 4 people, the statute, the enabling legislation says that we should have 9, right? And so is the definition of the majority based upon that statute, or based upon what's practically, the actual practical number?
For voting, if for other, like if the core majority of directors done in office.
Right.
That we confirm, and that's what Jeremy and Laura confirmed with ABO, and that they received opinion on that because it was contradicted what was in public authority law definition. Which doesn't
Yes.
say majority then, but majority.
Yep, I agree. Then in office, in terms of the denominators, that is the number of people actually then in office.
We have 13
And we have it
minutes.
in other.
Okay, yeah, I wanna
Yes, 13.
belabor this point. If the
Yeah.
math, if we can be more strict, if it's your legal opinion that we can be more strict in the statute, I think we can move on from this.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
All right.
okay,
great.
let's go. Okay, Megan?
Yep, that's
Megan,
fine.
is that all right?
That's fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
go on. We have 13 minutes. Let's use every minute here. All right, next.
Okay, now we have Ms. Christian's comments on the bylaws. I believe they were on the bylaws. If they were also on the conflict of interest policy, we can discuss that too. So there are
No,
some,
that's not Ms. Christian meant. She meant the issue with happening conflict of interest. It's about bylaws. It's not about conflict of interest policy.
Okay.
okay. Okay,
So we're on number 1. At least one consultant was assistant to politician, another was chair of the governance committee, did not make any changes when presiding in the committee. So these
Not
are
true.
not consultants,
Not
these
true,
are
she didn't.
advisors.
She's not a politician. She's
Yeah.
elected
Representative, right.
representative is
And
chair of
it hasn't been changed since 2010, because that's when I
and
left.
was a politician.
So
Yeah.
it
So,
was changed.
so I think, so these are So at least one consultant, so first of all, we have to make sure that this is not consultant. You guys are not consultants, you're advisors.
We're advisors.
Then she says, consultant advice should be given to the person asking for assistance outside of meetings. Consultants can observe from the audience and give advice in that person's own time. And consultants should not contribute to meetings. Okay, so you guys are advisors, you guys are not consultants.
Yeah, but that's exactly what, that's Lauren's response, the concept of committee advisors, so CLM picked it as this committee advisors, not consultants.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's
it's the wrong
talk-
term, it doesn't, it's.
That was what we
it's,
inferred, but we're open to feedback.
Yeah, I think it wasn't, we weren't totally clear on what the comment or question was in 1 through 4, but our best reading of it was that the author there was taking issue with the idea of the concept of committee advisors in Article 8,
Right.
Section 6.
That's right.
So one of the things Howard had said was that having our definition of committee advisors was really gilding the lily, as he said, in the board meeting. And he also said that this is already exists as what is appropriate. So I'm going to ask you, Jeremy, is that true?
What was the last part of what you said? This already exists?
The advisor role that we have is, as written in the bylaws, is gilding the lily, as Howard says, because per open meetings laws and per everything else, this should be something that already exists as something that's in practice. Is that true?
I mean, so we spent a lot of time talking through this with the committee. There's obviously many contributions that advisors can make, either because of their past service on the governance committee or for many other reasons, and their opinions are valued. I think where we landed, however, was that even though any individual is free to attend a meeting and make comments as if any other member of the public can make comments, the committee advisors have taken on a little bit more of a ongoing role, even though they are non-voting, and they're joining meetings and giving opinions, and it's not always clear to the public, for example, whether or not they're a member. And more importantly, I think where the rubber meets the road here is in conversations with the committee, governance committee, people felt like if someone is going to have an ongoing kind of permanent advisor role, that should be something that the entire committee votes on and approves, and it should be sort of time limited, like a year, but it can always be renewed. And that's where we landed on this Section 6. So I get Howard's point that it's gilding the lily, but I don't really, I don't fully agree with that characterization, because I think this was something that was discussed and thought about, and and like I said, I think where the majority of the committee seemed to land is that they would like it, if they're going to have an ongoing advisor who attends meetings regularly and gives their valuable input, the whole committee at the outset should vote to have that happen.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
That's fine, yeah.
This
It
became
does
so
make sense.
controversial, it seems, that
Mhm.
this makes sense. Having the committee and putting it, because it's not gilding the lily, it obviously became controversial.
Sorry, but I don't understand.
I think no matter what we do, this concept is going to be controversial.
Gilding is like putting gold around it, right? You have a lily, you put gold around it.
This is one of those sayings from the days of old.
Victorian version.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
This position is new. It started when you came on board, you decided you needed advisors, or did you call them advisors, did you call them, you call them advisors. You needed some advisors. This is new to the board. This is not something that was existing all along. This is something where you said, I'm new to the board, I need advisory. And I was against it from the beginning because of the way it was done. You need advisors, the advisors can advise you all. They can come to a meeting, they can talk to you later, but this committee, the advisors speak as if they are members of the committee. They're not advisors, they are members.
They are advisors for me, so I
said
appreciate your input, and we hear you. I don't agree with you, but I hear what you're saying. Okay?
Well, you're gonna have a problem here.
That's fine. We'll go with that problem. Okay.
But this new part in the bylaws say the whole committee must approve.
Right.
Yes.
Entire committee must approve.
Committee must,
Which I understand, that
Yeah.
one person, but yes,
okay.
bylaws are breathable
Okay.
documents.
So, Megan and Conway.
So, two questions I have for Faye. Would it, as opposed to the committee, this provision that we have, that's proposed, it says that the committee will vote on whether or not we have advisors. So that's one. Should it, instead of the committee, be the board versus the committee? That's my first question.
I think it should be the board.
So that's one. And then two, I think probably getting more to the crux of your point, because I also share a similar concern about the longevity of the operation of somebody who comes into the board committee, who's not a member of the board of directors, that I think is probably what's driving some of the concern. Nothing against you, either of you personally, it's just the concept of somebody coming in who's not a fiduciary to the board, who will then have a operational aspect of coming in and being able to sit and advise us day in, day out, versus somebody we just pay as a one-off or consult as a one-off, who just gives us advice here or there, and then we don't see them again, and then we go on and make our decisions as a board, versus somebody who has a ongoing relationship with the board. There's a distinction between the two.
But I believe that
But it was strictly for the
finite
Yeah.
term limit.
We never thought it would go this
I
long.
thought it was just about the bylaws.
It was about the bylaws, period.
Yeah.
So it's written in the bylaws.
Right, that's the proposal now, yeah.
Yes, the new one,
Yeah.
to clarify those concerns, right? Or to address the concerns, and that it would be a finite period.
Yeah, so I was very clear when I was seated as the chair of the governance committee that I had no experience in governance. And so that's why I asked people that I knew that did have experience in governance to help.
I don't think you were here early on, were you?
I literally had left when they came in.
Yeah, so I think when the committee was first formed, I don't.
You weren't here.
And
Yeah.
had she known you'd be part of it, and you would have,
Yeah.
as your expertise, Lydia might have felt differently. There
So
was no nefarious intent with this, it really was just about.
I needed help,
The process
yeah.
and moving it along.
And I had, the support of Howard and David for the request. So I know that Faye didn't agree, but because I had David and Howard's approval to get it done, I went forward.
Yeah.
But I think the question is, what do you want to do long-term?
Yeah,
Are you happy with the changes, Conway?
well, I defer to Faye, because she raised the concern, so I want to,
Mm-hmm.
is it something, what would make this section workable in your view?
Okay.
Okay.
It's not gonna be workable the way it's written.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
Not with me, anyway. It doesn't matter. We're gonna have a board meeting, everyone has to vote, and,
Okay. So even if the full board approved of this, people, you would not be
no, I'm just
comfortable
saying
with
the
it?
board has to approve the bylaws.
Of course.
And I still have an objection,
Sure.
really to you, because you work with a politician.
I don't work for a politician, I work for an elected representative of government.
Okay, fine.
Big difference.
What is
I work
the
for a
title?
government
What is
office.
that officer's title?
My
What is,
State Senator Liz Kruger, she's chair of the Finance Committee.
fine. When I say politician, that's exactly what I mean. Maybe the wrong word, but I.
It is, it's a government office that I work in, just like REAC is a government
Okay, so
office.
we're gonna fight over the word, but.
No, it's a big distinction between a government office.
We are not fighting,
It's
Dave.
a government
I'm
office.
not-
Start a fight.
I
But a
just want,
senator is a politician, I'm not quite sure
but
what the
when you
distinction
work in
is.
a government office, we're very clear on this. I work on behalf of, when someone calls our office,
Sure,
whether they're a constituent,
I mean, we
whether
don't have to
they're
get into that.
Republican or Democrat or whatever, they're constituents.
Sure,
And we're not, well, it's true, I'm telling you how we operate in the office. So it's a government office, it's a district office. I get it.
but I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, Faye, but I think what the concern is that Senator Kruger
Yes.
may have different, incentives or, interests than what REAC has. It may not always be, the Venn diagram may be pretty close to Senator,
I
but it
will
may not
tell
always be
you
aligned.
that Senator Kruger, frankly, has not even looked at these bylaws. I'm here, she's not.
Yeah, but
She's
the
never-
point remains, and I think Conway's instinct of having Faye try and articulate the concern and whether or not having the board approve the committee advisors would address Faye's concern or not, and whatever else the Faye would like to raise.
Okay, so I am going to be very considerate of your 7 o'clock cutoff. It's now 7 o'clock.
I can stick around for a bit and so that we can finish at least this point. Lauren, I have the documents here and can handle the sharing of screens.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the flexibility. Okay, so let's keep on going. So Faye is saying that it really has to go to the board.
Well, that should handle it, because then I wouldn't have been approved, and there wouldn't have been any problem, but there could still be advisors on the committee.
Right.
That should satisfy the concern.
Mhm.
So Megan, do you have objections? Do you agree?
So I think no matter what we do, this topic is going to be controversial to multiple people on board, so I'm fine with how we have it now.
Okay. Conley?
I just don't know you're
Yeah,
going to get it approved by everyone.
Okay.
It may be more palatable if it has the board approval versus committee approval, just to make it
Yes, it's
something to
True.
give some more transparency. Yeah,
It sounds like you should do the board.
yeah.
Okay. So Jeremy, do you want to do that? Jeremy?
Yes, can you all confirm that you're seeing my screen that says,
See your screen.
okay, all right, I'm just a little, Teams is not what we typically use, so I just want to make sure. Okay, so I think where we landed is, okay, bear with me, folks, sorry. Let us stop that. Okay, I think what we want to share is the actual bylaw document. Okay.
Is Lauren gone?
Oh, it's in the conflict of interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so everyone's seeing committee advisors. So I think what we're saying is, right, however, each committee. So I think what we're saying is we're going to change this to the board. Right?
Okay, and Connor, is that?
Board.
Yeah, good.
I don't think we need to specify the threshold because that's already stated earlier. The board may invite one or more individuals who are independent to serve as non-voting members for a single committee, provided, however, that let me make this a little larger for you.
Well, I mean, we're not doing that. We're doing the advisors, right?
That's what it's doing.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were on the wrong paragraph.
On page 12,
Okay.
the advisors, I think.
Committee advisors.
Yeah, bottom of page 12.
I think this is where we landed on section 6. Okay,
Can you read it real quickly?
It's on page
yes.
Yeah, I see.
What
was the change that you're making?
So this section 6, I'm changing the lead-in language to say the board may vote to invite one or more individuals who are independent to serve as non-voting advisors. And then down in part C of that same section, where we talk about the fact that this decision to invite someone should be revisited at least once a year, I changed committee to board in both places.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so let me see where we are here, and figure out what the right stopping point is. We've got other comments from, yeah, okay, so let me move this over, try and switch to, okay. Bear with me, folks, this is tech. Do we want to move on to the next comment? From
As long as you're available, just let us know when you have to leave.
Okay, thank you, that's very thoughtful. I just want to make sure I save these changes. So. Okay. All right, that is saved. Okay, let me try something here. Let's go back to this.
Tissue.
And we're trying to share the. Okay. All right, so I have them in front of me. The next in hard copy, the next comment here is Article 3, Section 9. Please explain.
Okay.
So, Faye, did you want to provide any further background? I think I understand your comment, but I don't want to assume that I do. So.
I don't have my paper with me.
Okay. I think I know what the comment was. This is the.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Take your time.
I'm fine with it.
You okay with it as written? Okay.
Okay, we can move on to the next one.
Okay. Great. Next one is number 6. Comment number 6. Time limit should be noted. So I think what this is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Faye, but I think what this is saying is that there are these 2 board members who, by statute, are permitted to designate a representative. The chair and the commissioner can designate a director of budget can designate a representative who's allowed to attend board meetings on their behalf and cast votes. So this language that we have in here is a right under the statute, and I think the point in this comment is that the question is, should there be a time limit on that designation of a representative?
mean, should they
Is
be
that
executed
the
for a particular meeting or
comment?
for rest of the year? Or- That's a good point.
My train of thought. Was the chairperson can have a representative, such as, I don't have any problem with that. When I think about the committee chair of the board of directors, I think that's fine.
We have to thought about board members designated someone else. It's not about ex officio, because ex officio always have designee and there's no time period for them. As long as, for example, Commissioner Wisnauskas wants to have Megan Anderson as her designee, that there's no time limit for that. She can change her designee, but there is
But
no.
that was fine.
Yes,
But
so
I
that's
thought we
actually
had-
what we
I thought there
discussed.
was a part in there about, committee.
It's not about,
No,
not about
no.
designee by other board members,
I
only
thought
ex
it
officio.
was committee members.
No, it's
So,
not.
no, it's only, yes, this is only about
Only
ex
for-
officios have the right
for
to
Virgin.
appoint
Fine with
designee.
it, but when I was reading it, for some reason, I thought it was about committee members,
No, it's not.
bringing in or having someone
I think
substitute
a lot
for
of it's
them.
about me.
But that means they were doing the earlier part of the
I just
year.
want a prominent.
Someone wanted someone to come into the meeting and for,
Yes, and designate someone will attend in lieu of me. I
Yes,
cannot
on their
attend,
behalf.
and
I
that will be,
remember that was-
yes, we decided that it's not possible.
that was the problem. I
Yeah,
remember that.
we-
Well, that's what I was addressing
Mhm.
when I,
Okay,
I don't
so
think
that's,
we've ever made
that's
it.
something
That's
that we
resolved.
eliminated.
That was
already.
never even a first draft.
Okay, let's go on to the next.
In section 11,
Yeah.
that's also something that's already in the open meetings law.
So it's open meeting law.
So-
Okay, Faye, so your next one that you talked about, if a member is unable to attend due to health but is on video, members should be allowed to speak and vote if member of the committee, and that's been addressed on open meeting law.
Yes, we actually have the open meetings law policy for video conferencing. So if someone is not attending due to illness, this member is even counted towards the quorum, even if he's not or she's not present. So that's already covered by the open meetings law, video conferencing section, certain section of this law. So that's why there's a reference to the open meetings law only. So it's already covered. So this person can
read?
no, I'm not gonna stay for so long. I would just want to get through these things. I don't think there's any more.
You have
No,
articles.
you got quite a few more.
Yes, quite a few more here. Yeah, at least 2 more pages.
Jeremy, I think we can move to Article 4, Section 1, because this one is kind of, it's already in the law.
Okay.
So you said if another vice president is needed, an amendment by the bylaws would be time costly. This should be stricken or ordered in such a way if situation is needed. For example, CEO may do so with COO comptroller with cause. So the response was the board has the power to add other officers that are not named in the bylaws by resolution. Okay, so that's how we addressed it. Okay,
I'm okay.
you're right? Okay, we'll move on. Section 3, number 9 says presented to the board incompatibility, insubordination, and leaking information. So you said the response was to discuss at the meeting, Jeremy?
Maybe Faye could just explain the comment? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it says presented to the board, i.e. incompatibility, insubordination, and leaking information. So I just wondered if there's any further context.
Okay, to discuss it, meeting, wanna add that?
Yeah, this is the meeting. What are we talking, what would you like to see?
Well, I think we need to put something in about, definitely insubordination.
Oh, okay, you're talking about like if a board member is leaking confidential information,
Yes,
what happens?
yes.
Okay. I think we addressed that
Section 9.
generally in
General,
removal.
general counsel on law.
And I don't know your code of ethics. Something in the code of ethics.
It should be in code of
Section
ethics.
1.
Shouldn't be in code of ethics.
Oh, here's the code of ethics. There is something in there about, but I think there's something in the bylaws about removal of board members, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, removal. Any member of the board may be removed by the governor for cause after opportunity to be heard, but not less than 10 days written notice in the event of 3 consecutive unexcused absences. And then we proposed this other language about unexcused absences. But I think, so, okay, so maybe you want to add something into that section about, or I think that might be covered for cause, actually.
Yeah, you know,
When we- Yeah, that's cause. If someone's revealing confidential information, you're fired for cause.
and I think this,
Yeah.
as I look at Faith's comment, you know, number 8 says Article 4, Section 1. Okay, and it's about officers.
Right.
Article 4, Section 1 is about officers, and the comment starts by saying that CEO has some control, maybe to remove other officers with cause, and maybe it should be presented to the board for, you know, if these situations arise where an officer is exhibiting insubordination or leaking information, et cetera, and we have a mechanism whereby another officer can be removed or fired, and generally it's, you know, and this really goes, I guess this is what you were all leading to me to anyway. The next question, number 10 in Faye's comments, addresses this, and so we talked to the comment is Section 3, removal of officers should be done by the CEO with the board's approval. And Faye, do you want to just take a minute to read our response? I know for me, I find it easier to read it myself than have someone read it out loud.
After multiple rounds of drafting and extensive input by and discussion with and among the governance committee, we have suggested language to address how officers should be appointed, hired by the board versus the president/CEO. We think best meets Riak's needs. Of course, this does not mean the HR or president CEO will not be involved in the decision. Ultimately, this decision is within the discretion of the board, and we can revise this if it is.
And that response is maybe not quite as helpful as it could have been. The board gets to elect the officers, and with respect to certain officers, they need to get the recommendation of the CEO so that that person feels like they have input. They have to work with these people, and the mirror image is true. You know, only the board has the authority to remove an officer, and in the case of the CFO, COO, general counsel, and internal controls officer, the board needs to consult with the president and CEO prior to removing, but it's really ultimately the board's decision. But we need input on the hiring side of things from the CEO, and we need input from the CEO on the firing side of things.
Okay, same response for human resources is responsible for hiring and firing governed by the department head. Ultimately, decision is within the discretion of the board, which revise it if the board wishes.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's intention is that the board would substitute its judgment for the HR department, and we would very much expect that personnel issues would be addressed in the first instance in the HR department, but it's not the chief human resource officer that should make that decision when it comes to these very specific officers who are named in the bylaws, meaning the CFO, COO, general counsel, in the internal controls officer. HR person may point out that there's a real personnel problem, but ultimately that should go to the board and make the decision about these very high-level officers.
Do we have to say by a vote of the board?
Repeat, Margie.
Do we have to say by a vote of the board? Like, do the majority of the board have to decide on the termination?
I don't think so.
So everywhere that we say the board will do something or the board will act, that defaults to the voting threshold that we have earlier set forth,
Got it.
that it's the
Okay.
majority. So that's why we usually
Okay.
don't say it each instance that you need a vote or you need a resolution or you need a majority, because it's already addressed.
Okay.
But good question.
Okay.
Okay, so comments 12, 13 are, I think we already addressed comment 12, I believe, and we already addressed the idea of a comptroller. So anything that we have, anything that we still need to
Well,
talk
we
about?
discussed the need of a treasurer. We actually didn't iron out the comptroller issue. But we, yeah.
No.
Well, it's a staff person. You know, the organization can hire staff when it,
All right, that's true, let's jump.
All right.
okay, so comment 14?
Uh-huh. Governance and Audit Committee, the board may appoint non-independent members to the Governance Committee. Past experience has shown these members discuss with others.
I think that's what
I think that's.
Mr. Paul, we already addressed it.
Already addressed it.
Okay, so keep on going.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Okay.
wait,
We have more.
wait. Whoa, more snuck
We have
in.
more. Yeah.
More.
We are done with the bylaws.
Okay, I do need to drop off now.
All
I'm
right.
happy to join
So
a,
maybe we have to schedule another meeting
Okay.
for Code of Ethics. Okay, so we'll
Oh,
go
yeah.
into that right now.
Yeah, because
okay?
this is substantial.
So thank you very much, Jeremy, for being here. We will schedule another meeting for the Code of Ethics and Conflict of Interest. Thank you so much.
yes, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure and privilege to work with you all. Did you want me to, are you'll email me afterward about times? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
You could
okay, good.
send us
Thank
the
you all.
updated
Nice meeting
ethics
everyone.
plan.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
More.
Wait, who bought this bread?
I did, have some. It's really good. It's from Mediterranean Eatery, it's the best. And there's like paper over there.
You wanna keep it?
Okay, so, all right, so the question is,
Sure, thanks.
should we adjourn
Yeah.
for the next meeting?
Okay.
So let's adjourn this meeting. It is now 7:22. Very grateful for everybody who stayed. And we will send out notifications about the next meeting as soon as I get the availability. Okay? And hopefully, I don't know that we can get another meeting before the board meeting, so at this point, we're gonna bring the bylaws before the board, but we probably will not be able to bring the code of ethics
Because we didn't.
and the conflict.
But code of law, bylaws will stand on the agenda, right?
Yes, we will keep the bylaws on the agenda.
Code of ethics.
All right.
Remove for now.
Megan, agreed?
That's fine.
Conway, agreed?
Sounds good.
Okay, we're there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.